years ago, Sri Lanka was one of a few select countries which pushed and pressurized the world, saying we need a treaty to protect marine biodiversity beyond national borders, on the high seas and in the high seas and on the seabeds. And just a few days ago, after 2 decades of negotiations and deliberations by scientists, diplomats, and many others, this treaty was ratified by the required number of nations in the world, and it will go into effect in January of 2026. This is known as the Marine Biodiversity Treaty, and Sri Lanka should be justly proud of pushing for this treaty, and now we need to see what we can do with it. Right. Good evening and welcome to Face to Face. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Niresh Eliathambi, and to discuss this extraordinary topic, which could be of great benefit to Sri Lanka, I have with me Mr. Muditha Katuwawala, who is the Executive Director of the Pearl Protectors, and Mr. Nuwan Peiris, who is an attorney at law specializing in shipping and the law of the sea. Good evening and welcome, gentlemen.
It's a pleasure.
Good evening. Nice to be here.
Right. So let me start with Nuwan. Nuwan, this treaty, which sort of came up without any fanfare, and most Sri Lankans are unaware that we played a big role in getting this done. And the name of it is a tongue twister. It's known in short as the Marine Biodiversity Treaty, and the even shorter version is the BBNJ Agreement.
Yes.
But the real name is the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea on the Conservation and Sustainable Use of Marine Biological Diversity of Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So very complex treaty indeed. So Nuwan, can I have you explain to our audience what this treaty is about?
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me here. Yes, it's a complex treaty, and it is we call it now, we have this United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is the constitution for the oceans. Now, within that framework, we passed what we call the third implementation agreement to enforce the matters that fall beyond the coastal jurisdictions, right? As regards marine biodiversity. So that is one of the most significant breakthroughs ever in the environmental, or rather marine environmental law field, if not one of the finest steps that we have taken as far as protection of the marine environment is concerned. So what is it? As you quite rightly said, it applies beyond the national jurisdictions of coastal state. Secondly, it protects the marine biodiversity as well as the marine genetic resources, and also this is where what is important in this convention. There is a access and benefit sharing regime for developing countries and all those people. So anyone who is exploring and exploiting, you must share there is a benefit sharing mechanism where we should take advantage of. So it is within those 3 or 4 pillars that we have constructed this implementation agreement to the Biodiversity Convention. So this is the whole framework that we are going to talk about today, and I'm really happy that your organization, your media institution, is really taking the initiative, because this is the time where Sri Lanka should get involved, our scientists should get involved, and once those mechanisms are put in place, go to those places, that is those committees that are going to be set up, and formulate rules so that whatever the knowledge and the benefits that we get will be shared among us, including ourselves. So this is a very critical point to discuss this topic. That's what I have to say.
Right. Thank you, Nuwan. And Muditha, would you like to add to that? because we have two points of view here. We have Nuwan, who is from the legal point of view, and Muditha, who is from the environmental point of view, both of which are quite critical, especially to our national interest. So could I have you adding to that, Muditha?
Of course, I think for Sri Lanka, I think this is very important treaty finally being ratified. Sri Lanka was the 57th country to ratify. It needed 60 countries to ratify to come into force.
I believe Morocco last week became the 60th country.
Sierra Leone also became the last country to sign. But there is more countries now ratifying as well. Now currently at 64 countries, I think 149 countries have been signatories. So which means that you might have a question, why are the other countries delaying? Because I believe there are many countries that do have to go through parliamentary process to sort of ratify it within, and then so it will take some time. But
right,
of course,
just to explain to our viewers, when a country, a government goes and signs a convention, an international treaty, in many instances it would be valid immediately, but in especially in democracies, the parliament needs to vote and ratify it. So there is the signing, and then there's the ratification, and sometimes it takes a few years before one's parliament gets round to it. And in very rare instances, countries' parliaments have actually rejected what their own governments have signed, but that's very rare. Unfortunately, this has not happened here. So we have 64 ratifications now
in the place.
And therefore it will come into force. I believe the date is January 17th of 2026. Yes, do continue.
Of course. So, I mean, this treaty now looks at 4 main areas, which is very important for Sri Lanka. One is where it talks about marine protected areas. If you see the Sustainable Development Goals, by 2030, under the SDG 14, there is countries do need to accomplish or reach goals. One of these goals is where 30% of our marine environment or the ocean needs to be protected. We call it a marine protected areas. Right now, it's about merely 1% that is actually being protected. So to reach these 30%, we do need to go look at the high seas, seas beyond any jurisdiction, which is 2/3 of the world's ocean is beyond the jurisdiction. So access to this is important, but right now, currently, there was no governance or legally binding any sort of framework to see what happens in the high seas. Now, this treaty actually enables it, which is very important. Now, for Sri Lanka, why it's important is because we are an island and we are facing the Indian Ocean. And the Indian Ocean has so much of marine biodiversity. A lot of it at the seabeds, there's a lot of minerals, including cobalt. I mean, you may have you remember recently there's this seamount, which is in the continental shelf. At some point, if this seamount is to be deep sea mined, there has to be environment impact assessments done. So now this treaty allows it to have a process of doing environment impact assessment, just like how we do it in our land under our jurisdiction. Then of course we look at increasing marine protected areas, and also genetics of marine species. There's a lot of industries using these genetics for their benefit. For example, pharmaceuticals. There's like deep sea sharks that are being used for it, but there is no real fund that is being put for the conservation of it. So this treaty actually looks into it. And also, like Sri Lanka right now is not as excelled as many developed countries on research, on strategies of conservation. So this treaty actually allows countries, small island nations, developing countries, to share, especially developed countries where they do research, for that sharing capacity, so that all countries have the same equal strategies going forward in conservation, and also technology and many other advancement sharing. So it's very important for Sri Lanka, and I think just like how we're looking at being the maritime hub in the Indian Ocean, I think this will enable us, give us capacity to excel in the sciences and the research of our marine biodiversity.
Right, and of course, much of the Earth's surface is covered by water, by the sea, and I believe what we call international waters or beyond the national jurisdictions, which of course is what this treaty will be covering. That's about 70% of the oceans, isn't it, Muditha?
It is 2/3 of the ocean that gets that is encompassed in the High Sea Treaty. So
that's an enormous
area. I mean, we're looking at areas where basically no country has jurisdiction. So now having access to this means countries together can work together to find the best solutions coming forward, and also it allows for the conservation. I think right now, because of overfishing, because of many challenges, pollution, transboundary pollution that is in our ocean, there's a lot of challenges our ocean is facing. And so one area during this ocean decade by the UN, up till 2030 is the ocean decade, this is one of the most significant treaties to come in place to safeguard our oceans for the future.
Right. Nuwan, can I put this question to you? Now, Sri Lanka, yes, we have been a seafaring nation for centuries, but at the present time, because of our economic situation, we don't have the wherewithal to actually exploit even what is within our economic zone, our EEZ. And we speak about it at various fora. There are conferences here on the media. We speak about all these vast riches which are there, but we are really unable to explore, to map, to exploit these resources, and also to protect them. But now, when it comes to this particular treaty, how do we go about this at all as Sri Lanka, as a seafaring nation?
Rather, your question is, should we do anything about it because we are so poor? I mean,
I'm sure we'd like to,
yes.
but how does this
That's
work?
a brilliant question, because we can. That is how we negotiated it. Even as you quite rightly said, 20 years ago we started. We also gave part of the leadership that is required, because there is a benefit sharing mechanism. Because remember, the genetic resources in the 21st century is the new gold in the ocean. So there is a battle for this. As Muditha quite rightly pointed out, there's a demand in the pharmaceutical industry, food processing industry. So there will be an explosive demand in this area. So now what should we do about it? And there is a mechanism, because in the conference of parties that is going to come next year, there will be a scientific committee where we have to draft rules, and we must draft rules in the finance committee and the scientific committee as to what kind of rules should be there to have access, number one, access, and to do the benefit sharing. So what Sri Lanka should do is, like what we did in the 70s and all that with regard to the Law of the Sea Convention, our team of scientists, whatever the little knowledge that we have with regard to this, I know this is cutting edge knowledge, we don't have much knowledge. We can take the initiative to pass rules, draft resolutions, and initiate the conference and move the conference flow to have rules to share the benefits and the knowledge of these processes. And you see, there are mechanisms, even in the International Seabed Authority, where we can send our personnel on board, vessels, so that we can get that benefit or the knowledge. So when there is some kind of avenue open for us, what the government should do right now is to immediately form scientific groups and devise the next scientific strategy as to how to tackle and what rules we should be there, and what sort of resolutions, instruments that we are going to table to get the consensus to become law. As Muditha rightly said, that we are a seafaring nation, but now we should also take the initiative with regard to scientific development in this region as well as in the world. So now this is a turning point, and it's nice that you are even initiating this conversation. Being in a developing country, in an organization like this, you see, there are so many media organizations, maybe one of the few organizations in the world who is talking as part of their prime time news bulletin. So shouldn't we be proud of that? The fact that our media itself has really, taking a forward-looking approach and has really become mature. And you, as a senior journalist, know the importance of going at the right time. So this is the time to discuss and even initiate. No point in talking about all these things we missed. Saying that the rules have been drafted, we have nothing to do with it. Western people have taken it over. No, this is the ideal time. So that's the time now. So the answer to your question is, we can get benefits. There are provisions to say that there are benefit sharing mechanisms, access, right to access. So now let's go in and draft those rules.
Right. Muditha, let me put this question to you. Now, I would think that up to now, much of the exploitation of the high seas, in it, the seabed, all that, has been done by these advanced nations, those Western nations and also Eastern ones, such as Japan, China. They have scientific vessels, they have fishing fleets exploring all over the world. So it's been very much the richer countries which have benefited from the high seas, unfortunately, including, of course, oil exploration and so on. But with this treaty, this sort of, I wouldn't say it's going to be a level playing field, but it brings us into the picture, doesn't it? All these smaller nations, perhaps 100 smaller nations, which will have some kind of say.
Of course, I think over the past century, I think countries, developed countries have become so much more developed, while developing countries have become stagnant, and that gap has increased over time, resulting in especially small island nations, islands like us, it has become so much more difficult for our explorations, our research, our advances in technology to proceed forward. So this treaty actually allows islands or countries, coastal countries like us, to be able to advance in our research, conservation-based strategies, to develop better conservation-based strategies. So I think as we do it, it allows us to sustain the marine environment or the ocean. Exploitation has happened for the past decades, and we've seen over the years how overfishing, how pollution has depleted our marine environment. For example, yellowfin tuna, it's been fished. Industrial fishing has taken over parts of where in the Indian Ocean where the yellowfin tuna is, and now it has really gone down. So likewise, there's been a lot of other marine species that have depleted over the years. Similarly, it's going to be something in the near future, we're going to see how deep sea mining is going to take over, because many of the rare earth metals, many of the important metals we find at the bottom of the sea now, and a lot of countries have now found themselves depleted in their own terrestrial mine resourcing. So now they're looking at the bottom of the sea, and close to Sri Lanka, there's so many areas where there is actually a lot of rare earth metals, especially cobalt. Cobalt is something that is being used for batteries, rechargeable batteries, and so alloys as well. So there's going to be an increased demand by developing countries. So I think this treaty now allows to assess environment impact assessments before conducting such deep sea mining. If it's damaging, there has to be alternatives, or there has to be a way to stop from proceeding. But it also, one of the key things is sharing of marine research, and so that allows more countries, coastal countries, to cooperate, allowing Sri Lanka to regain what we've lost over the years, especially on the research end of it. And I think personally, I think this will, over the years, if we do it right, our blue economy can be further strengthened. I think we've seen so many economic debacles in Sri Lanka because we've been depending so much on the usual economics, and so we have if we do this right, we can actually open up services, we can actually do extend our services on the marine research end, and we can groom a next generation of marine researchers in Sri Lanka that could work in the Indian Ocean. So it is very important to us, but it's just that we need to do it sustainably and we need to do it right.
Now, an interesting point you brought up was the rare earth metals, minerals, such as cobalt. Now, there was a time, for centuries, people mined the earth for things like gold, silver, diamonds, oil, coal. But that era is now being replaced with these rare earth metals, isn't it? Now it's all about that. We see U.S. President Donald Trump signed an agreement with the Ukraine, which will allow American companies access to mine rare earth metals in eastern Ukraine. And there is currently a huge war going on, but he's looking at beyond the war, and when peace comes, it will be US companies which will benefit. So this is very, very strategic, isn't it? And whatever you have on land, you will have 10 times as much or more in the sea. So apart from cobalt, what are we looking at, and why is it that countries are more interested now? Is it because of technology?
Well, I believe you're absolutely right, like because the new technologies that we depend on solely, especially on rechargeable batteries, AI is getting popular, which means there is a need for much larger energy. So energy storage is going to be very vital in the next 10 to 20 years. This means that some of the natural resources needed for such development is going to be at the bottom of the sea. And why it's detrimental to go and mine most of this is because over the past thousands of years, millions of years, these metals have stayed at the bottom of the sea, and it has built its own ecosystem, a very unique ecosystem that you cannot find elsewhere. This ecosystem thrives on some of these resources that is available, and these resources that many big companies, many developed countries are now eyeing to go grab. So if this is done in a way that is detrimental to the marine environment, we will lose ecosystem itself, which we have so less knowledge of. Deep sea mining, and also right now the seabed mapping. Right now only about 27% of the seabed has been mapped. They expect by 2030 they are planning to map the whole sea or the ocean, which means much of these natural resources will get exposed, and through this exposing of these natural resources, many countries will attempt to go mine or extract these natural resources for their own benefit. And right now, up till a week ago, there was no governance or legally binding agreements that was doing it. So this treaty will now enable it, which is actually a positive thing. So, I mean, coming back to your question about the depletion of resources, it is happening at a exponential rate right now. Many countries are fighting over it. They say like the future wars will be determined based on the water, the sand, and the natural resources, the rare metals. So I think it's vital that we now have this treaty, which allows us to do EIAs, research, and also declare marine protected areas, which is very important, especially when it comes to our ocean.
Right. And Nuwan, let me ask you to clarify one point which is in this treaty. it excludes the fisheries industry, doesn't
Yes.
it? Which is, of course, one of the main industries on and in the oceans.
Yes.
Could you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, during the negotiation process, they realized that there's a big demand for these, newly emerging goals, like as rare earth material and so on and so forth. Now, the reason why they excluded fish from this treaty is that they want to have more checks and balances as far as these resources are concerned. And there was a doubt whether if you try to merge the two regimes, that is the fisheries regime with the marine genetic resources and other scientific resources, then the problem is that the politics with regard to fisheries is very sensitive, because even the developing countries have a stake, right? So with regard to marine genetic resources, only the developed countries have a stake. So therefore, that is why they said, let's have a different regime where there is access and benefit sharing mechanism, and even when you try to go explore and exploit, you see, you can, you have to share your resources. We'll put people on board the vessel so that we can learn from it, and so on and so forth. Fisheries is a different thing. You just go where the fish is. You put those transponders and the fisheries fishing vessel detection equipment, and you just go on. So that is a pretty basic today in today's scientific standard. There is no need of having a benefit sharing mechanism or sharing of scientific resources. The necessity is significantly less. Here what is important is, as Muditha said, that the developed countries is what they who have these resources. So they are the people who explore, and we don't know the techniques, and thereafter they exploit, and you're talking about billions and trillions of dollars in years to come. So immediately that they just looked into this loophole and plugged into it. That's a good thing, excluding fisheries. And there's one more thing I need to add. Now, why this convention is important is that now marine genetic resources. There was an earlier debate in the 20 years ago, whether marine genetic resources are living resources. In that case, you can't patent it. Right now, here is the catch. Now, today we have identified this. I identified it as a non-living resources, which means that although resources can't be patented, the extraction process can be patented. Now, you know what the problem is. Then, patent is an exclusive monopoly to explore and exploit that particular resource the way they want. Now, this is where the stumbling block comes. That is why we need to go to these international forums, that is, the committee that they're going to set up, the scientific committee that we are going to set up, and take the initiative as Sri Lanka or the developing countries, like the way we gave leadership 20 years ago for this convention, this particular implementation agreement, and draft rules as far as patenting and industrial and all kinds of, developing that patent-related rights. Now, this is where, when the benefits get shared, then we also can advance incrementally, or we can also advance in our country. So that is the most important thing. So yes, it doesn't cover fish, but it covers much more important things. And the regime, as you quite rightly said initially, is a very complex thing.
Yes. Right. We are, of course, quite used to foreigners and other countries. Yes. Coming in here and taking our resources and waltzing through customs and whether it is Gouda gemstones or whether it's fauna and flora, people actually carry off everything from tortoises to spiders, and of course the flora, the different types of rare species which we have.
Yes.
But now we are talking about something immensely larger than
yes.
what we have on land here. And even though we may not have the resources to exploit these, we need to stop other countries from coming in there and taking what could be ours or what we should have some kind of interest in. And right now there is actually a bit of a contentious issue with India, isn't it? Where
yes.
India has claimed a certain area of the Indian Ocean for mining purposes,
yes.
and Sri Lanka has a counterclaim. Would you like to expand on that one?
Yes, it's simple. Now, that is an area that we have put a claim with regard to our extended continental shelf. And it basically disputes the claims that we have with India, or even at a particular point, even with Maldives. Now, this convention
the
applies.
continental shelves are actually sort of merging and clashing. So you have India, Maldives, and Sri Lanka.
Yes. So we need to resolve our dispute. This convention applies even beyond those claimed areas, because the claimed areas will be determined by the UNCLCS, United Nations Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf. We are making submissions to that particular commission, and those disputes are now being looked into. Now, this convention applies to areas beyond national jurisdiction. So areas beyond national jurisdiction will begin to shrink over the years for the years to come. Once those we have jurisdiction up to extended continental shelf, and even beyond that we are going to claim an extended continental shelf. So once those extended continental shelves also come, that area is going to shrink. So this convention applies to those areas that are beyond the national jurisdictions. So that is that. So we don't need to confuse the two. And secondly, now when we have, as you said, the people come and steal and go. Yes, now there are mechanisms. We negotiated some of the provisions. Like say in this region, if there is an issue like that, then we can now we hear these scientific vessels coming from other countries and spying and so on and so forth. Now see, they know why they should come to areas like this, because this is Indian Ocean region is rich with marine biodiversity resources. That's why they are coming. They're not just coming for oil. Oil is just a cheap stuff. This is like you are talking about the new gold. So that is why we need to see that when research vessels come, we can basically enforce rules and regulations through the central mechanism that is going to be put under this convention. That is the implementation agreement, and that this implementation agreement has enforced regional treaties to be entered to supervise vessels which are beyond the national jurisdiction, operating beyond the national jurisdiction. That's a salient feature. And whenever those vessels call into the port, you have the port state control jurisdiction. So like those mechanisms have been set up. So as you can see, that a lot of checks and balances have come in order to address the biodiversity and the marine genetic resources. So we are sitting on a massive wealth. We are discussing this right at this moment, which is very good. So now what we need to do is to have a good scientific strategy, political scientific strategy, as to take this forward regionally and internationally.
And for decades, we simply ignored what is ours in our own EEZ, because we were so engrossed in our own problems on land, and we became landlubbers rather than the seafaring nation that we once were. Now, let me also ask Muditha, you mentioned seabed mapping, and it struck me that on land you can't walk 10 or 20 meters without Google Maps or some other company knowing you have moved from here to there. So everything has been mapped in such great detail. We know exactly what's where on land, down to the second. If you move to the other side of the studio, then Google Maps will know it, Dialog will know it, all of these companies will know this because of your phone, and they'll know exactly what terrain you're going on. But the ocean floor is completely different, isn't it? It's unmapped.
It is.
And I think there is this. I think we need to clarify. Even naval submarines don't go very deep. Perhaps 1,000 feet or so. They don't go very deep. They're pretty much near the surface when you look at the depth of the ocean. So no one really knows what's at the bottom in great detail. I think the larger salient features have been mapped, but much of the ocean floor simply hasn't been mapped. We really don't know.
We know so much about the universe than our seabed. That's the reality, and that's something that really needs to change. And one of the biggest challenges over the years why we couldn't do it is because the vast ocean, the depth of it, it crushes. It has so much potential power that no submarine can easily go down to map some of these areas. Now, of course, with new technology, these mapping has become more easy, efficient. By 2016-17, only about 7% of our seabed was mapped, and that was also mostly because of ships passing through the shipping lanes, which has mapped it. Interestingly, if you remember MH370, when the Malaysian Airlines disappeared, there was a lot of rescue effort that was put to the western side of Australia to look for this plane, the lost plane. That has resulted in much of that area being mapped. So these were the external factors why the seabed was actually mapped. But now there's specific effort being put to map it for various reasons. Of course, one of the key investments for many of these companies or countries that are doing this is the marine the resources that are available at the bottom of the sea. Apart from that, there is also many new species being found, and some of these species are living in different conditions, vastly different from how we would even imagine how animals could live bottom of the sea. Because of the vents, volcanic vents, there is animals thriving. There's a different ecosystem that is living there. Their genetics.
I mean, you're talking about 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 feet below the ocean surface.
Very deep, exactly. It's pitch black. There's no sunlight going down there. There's no photosynthesis happening, and so it's a whole different ecosystem that is thriving down there. Now, along with the mapping of the seabed, you start exploring where and how these different ecosystems are living. That has started to feed into some of the genetic information that many companies are now racing to get, so that they can develop different drugs, cosmetics, and pharmaceuticals. So there's a wealth of resources, not just on the minerals that is available, but also on the genetics that are of animals living down here. Beyond that, the topography of the seabed, it allows you to determine how different seabeds change, how the currents have changed it over time, how volcanic activities have changed it. So these are all a wealth of information that we will be gaining through the mapping of the seabed, which I think is very important. But also, if that information goes into the wrong hands, that of course will lead to much more destruction. I think through the treaty, now it has found its checks and balances on how we could do it more sustainably without harming the marine environment while extracting these resources.
Right. Nuwan, now, correct me if I'm wrong, but up to now, any country could go anywhere as long as it wasn't within another country's economic zones. You could go anywhere and do whatever you wanted, pretty much. I mean, there are certain restrictions. There's a ban on whaling and so on. But you could go down to the seabed and do whatever, mine whatever. There really was no process. No one could actually say, hey, you can't do that. You're destroying the environment. I mean, on land we have all these rules and regulations, but here in the sea and at the bottom of the sea, you really didn't have any laws, any rules and regulations. How is this mechanism now going to work out? For example, let's say a company decides to mine for cobalt in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It's been mapped, it's been discovered, and that company has the wherewithal, the resources to do that mining. How would that process go about, or is the process now going to be mapped out?
Of course, this is if it is cobalt
or
some
any
of the
other.
some of the resources, then we have the International Seabed Authority as a regulation mechanism. Now, answering your prior the point that you raised, which is very, very critical, areas beyond national jurisdiction, what you have is the high seas freedoms, right? You can exploit, you can do whatever you want because it's nobody's land. Whoever who goes, you can just explore and exploit. Only restraint was that as far as the seabed is concerned, they put up what then they said that as far as the seabed is concerned, that is common heritage of mankind, Article 138 of the convention, Law of the Sea Convention, and then they set up what we call the International Seabed Authority. And if you want to explore and exploit the seabed beyond national jurisdiction, you make an application to the International Seabed Authority, and they will map out an area and they will keep another area for research for the International Seabed Authority to do, where we would go and join, and where the benefit is shared among the developing countries. That is how the areas beyond national jurisdiction was regulated by the International Seabed Authority. Now, as far as the marine genetic resources are concerned, they brought this one because this is the new goal that they have found, which does not come under the International Seabed Authority regime. So there was this loophole, right? So, and they wanted to cure that loophole through this convention, rather third implementation agreement to the convention. Because in fact they are looking into these high seas freedoms as far as scientific research and exploration is concerned, and thereafter want to regulate that. That is what we are looking at right now. So now what we need to realize is that there is some kind of opaque process unknown to the world when come to the exploration and exploitation of marine genetic resources. And this causes problems. In order to put an accountable process, as Muditha said, they have set up this convention, the implementation agreement. So now what we need to do right now is to engage with the world, or even Sri Lanka can take the initiative like the way we did in 1970s with regard to the Law of the Sea Convention itself, and draft rules and regulations so that we can have a benefit sharing mechanism. Because otherwise what will happen is this. Now, there are judgments from Australia or USA saying that, okay, resources can't be patented, but the extraction process can be patented. So now, if all these resources end up in the exclusive monopoly of the developed countries, that's it. You are going to set up another...
But with this convention, now the ball is very much in our court.
Absolutely. And that is why you have taken the initiative to call us and discuss what we should do, which is timely. Thank God it is timely. So now what we need to do is to collect the scientists and draft some rules. What are the benefit sharing mechanism rules that we need to have? What are the patenting application processes we need to have? And how much of information do you need to share? And if you're not sharing, what are the disclosure requirements? Like so on and so forth, we can put it. That is not there in the International Seabed Authority.
Right.
Right. So that is the difference. Now we have gone a step further. And there's another point. Now, when you apply for this kind of licenses and so on for exploration, exploitation of marine genetic resources, there are certain principles in this convention which are breakthrough principles have been applied, like precautionary principle. Now, if I am raising a doubt as a developing country saying that I think this process is somewhat tricky, it might damage the environment, then those days I have to prove, he who asserts must prove. Now, in today's environmental law, it has reversed precautionary principle. Now, the moment I raise that doubt, and if it's a credible doubt, the burden shifts, and you have to prove that it is in fact safe for the environment.
Excellent, so, excellent.
That is how the ball has shifted. As you said, quite rightly, the ball is in our court now.
In our court, and I'm afraid we are out of time. But I'm going to give Muditha the final word here. From an environmental point of view, how important is this convention?
Yeah, I think on our environment point of view, I think it's very important, especially in the Indian Ocean. Looking at the Indian Ocean, we are now facing so many challenges. As you know, it's on the equator because of various challenges, climate change and all these human activities, pollution, fishing, shipping. It has caused so much of stress to our ocean, especially the high seas, and we to date, we don't know exactly what's happening out there. Through this treaty, I think that capacity can be increased, and it allows us to explore much broader on different areas of marine biodiversity, and also especially going into the genetics, and also considering if you are to do large scale projects, how those projects could be harmful to the seabed or the deeper ocean. And so I think through this enabling, through this treaty, I think it really would pave way for a future that where we can protect and sustain our marine environment. So I think for Sri Lanka, there is a lot, like Nuwan was saying, we need to do right now. We have a lot of homework, but I think one of the biggest challenges is where we need a new generation of capable minds who can actually tackle this, who can take this up and take it forward. Some of the services that we can provide, Sri Lanka being in the center of the Indian Ocean, is vast, and so we do need to lessen the gap, the research gap, the advances, the research, the conservation strategy gaps that we have. We do need to reduce it. So I think we need to immediately start on this, and so pretty much soon we should be able to conserve not just our marine environment but the high seas as well.
Right, so we need to now look beyond the Sea of Sri Lanka at what we can do and what we need to do to protect and get involved in the resources which are beyond the Sea of Sri Lanka. My thanks to Muditha Katuwawala, Executive Director of the Pearl Protectors, and Nuwan Peiris, who is an attorney at law specializing in shipping and the law of the sea. Thank you very much for joining me this evening, gentlemen. And thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away because the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.